more than billions of pounds being saved in energy bill alone. So, for example, like the 5G network, roughly more than $1 billion in energy cost a year. All of those applications feed into things like artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and all the way down to people using ChatGPT at home. This is the next industrial revolution, but it's in space. It's not on Earth.
Such high-performance semiconductor materials could be worth £45 million a kilogram. This mission is all about testing the technology. If it works, the next time they do it for real, bringing the satellite back to Earth with its precious cargo. They've already tested a heat shield made from a secret material.
This is the heat shield down here. It's a test material, not the real thing. But the idea is that it's folded up origami style so it doesn't take up too much space. But then when it's needed, it opens up like an umbrella to about that size. And that will protect the satellite from the intense temperatures that are coming through the atmosphere, but also helps slow it down, a bit like a badminton shuttlecock, from 17,000 miles an hour. So it splashes down in the ocean at just 20.
At the UK's Satellite Applications Catapult, they're testing robots to build structures in space, alongside orbital factories making medicines and metal alloys. It's a mind shift in what's possible.
We can communicate from pretty much anywhere on Earth now using satellite technology. There's an opportunity now to think about how we use space in a different way, and the unique environment that space provides us with, that microgravity environment, means we can do things in space that we just can't do on Earth.
Space Forge started with 2 blokes in a garage not even big enough to park a car. It sounds like a story from Silicon Valley, but this is Wales, and they're going to space. Thomas Moore, Sky News in Cardiff.
Liverpool forward Mo Salah has ended the uncertainty about his future by signing a new deal with the club. Salah's had another strong season, scoring 27 Premier League goals, but his contract was due to run out at the end of the season, and he'd hinted he could leave. Well, he's now committed to another 2 years, which means he will have spent a decade on Merseyside.
Of course, I'm very excited. We have a great team now. Before also we have a great team, but I'm assigned because I believe the team can win trophies, and with the support of the fans and the city and the support they always give us in the games, that I believe we can win many trophies in the next years.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by the political commentator Benedict Spence and the Daily Mirror columnist Susie Boniface. Great to see you. Among the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front of The Guardian: Parliament recalled in bid to save British steel. We'll be right back.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before?
Yes.
Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with the political commentator Benedict Spence and the Daily Mirror columnist Susie Boniface. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. Great to have you. Now let's see what is on some of those front pages. Well, the Eye looks ahead to tomorrow, when Parliament will sit on a Saturday to discuss the future of British steel, with the Prime Minister warning that the UK's economic security is on the line. The Guardian also reports on the emergency legislation, reporting it paves the way for a likely nationalisation of the company. The Financial Times hears that a US central bank, the Federal Reserve, may intervene if Donald Trump's tariff scheme continues to cause market volatility. The Mirror pours scorn on Rishi Sunak's resignation honours list, in particular the peerage given to the former Education Secretary, Michael Gove. The Express speaks to a woman who claims she was arrested for confiscating her children's iPads. The Mail carries a photo purporting to show the head of NHS England asleep on a train shortly after he gave evidence to Parliament. And The Star has the story of a suspected shoplifter in a pet store who's alleged to have stolen birds by stuffing them into his underpants. That headline wrote itself. And we're joined tonight by Benedict Spence and Susie Boniface. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. So that story that broke earlier today, Parliament being called in tomorrow, the government saying they had no choice to do this because of the situation at the Scunthorpe plant. Let's start with that story. And Susie, if you want to start us in The Guardian.
Well, they did have a choice. They could have done it a month ago when the owner of the plant said this is what's going to happen. They could have done it several months ago when the unions warned this was going to happen. And they could even have done it when they came into office because Labour in opposition said this was going to happen and tried to put pressure on the Tories when they were in government to safeguard British steel. The fact they've left it to literally the 11th hour, a few days, a matter of hours before you go past the point at which you can order the coke and coal that keeps those furnaces open, just shows, I think, how last minute and rushed this is. This isn't, I'm afraid, I wish it was, but it's not a Prime Minister acting decisively to save an important British industry. He's talking it up that way, but this is a Prime Minister in a panic, fundamentally, because he should have done it a long time ago. He didn't need to call them back off holiday. He could have done it before they went.
And as much as we can certainly put a lot of the blame at the Prime Minister's door, this is an institutional thing. The fact that these are really our last remaining furnaces going in the UK after what happened caught up with Tata Steel, we've managed to get ourselves into this situation where we may not be able to produce our own steel, not even necessarily the virgin steel that you actually need to do anything useful, but just simply to recycle other people's steel, which leaves you completely at the mercy of major steel producers like China, for instance, or India, who might not have your best interests at heart. And at a time when the government is turning around and saying, well, we might need to rearm and we need to have lots of investment projects because we need to improve infrastructure, to not actually have control over your own steel production capacity is incredibly short-sighted. In any situation, this would be silly, but at a time of fracturing sort of peace around the world and rising costs for the production of all of these things anyway, and raising concerns around trade, this is catastrophic. So, yes, I think Susie's right that this is something that the Prime Minister should have addressed beforehand. But how on earth it was that the Tories allowed us to get to that position at all, you know, in the pursuit of the free market and that being the best thing, incredibly short-sighted.
There's a lot of questions about how this Chinese company actually handled the plant as well. It does cost £700,000 a day. So is nationalisation the right way to go?
It's the only way to go. And, you know, there's lots of things being said by people who think that if you don't make your own virgin steel from iron ore, it's not as good as steel. That used to be the case. Today, you can make very wide variety of grades of steel. You can pretty much do all the stuff that you can do now. Some of them, the most high-tech steels that we use in this country, the most delicate stuff is made in electric arc furnaces from recycled steel. And we actually recycle more, we have more scrap steel ourselves than we do the iron ore. We don't mine iron ore. So it actually makes us more self-reliant, less dependent if we are recycling some of that scrap steel, which we're throwing away more than we're actually producing. So it can be beneficial to do that. But the fact is that Labour knew when it was in opposition that this was the problem, and it was quite clear and it was quite strong on what needed to be done about it. And it should have been working on this since day one, and to avoid this ever getting this bad. Not just because it looks bad and it's messy and it's going to be expensive to try and take a big company away from a Chinese firm which is going to then sue you for the loss of its asset, even if it is one that's costing it lots of money. It's the fact that there are 3,000 jobs that are attached to it, and all those jobs have a home or rent or a mortgage or food or a car or families, and they've all made different decisions in the past year because they don't know if their job's still going to be there. If they'd had that reassurance and if they had acted quickly at the start, as they said they were going to on an awful lot of things when they took power, then we wouldn't be in a situation, those jobs would have been safer for longer.
And the line about jobs is the one that the Eye is going with, and on their front page, battle to protect UK jobs, like you say, 3,000. PM warns of economic security on the line. I mean, it's the 3,000 jobs, but really it's the whole community around it. It's Scunthorpe, effectively. The question to you, Benedict, is nationalisation the only way to go?
Yes, it is the only way to go at this moment in time. And I think it's curious that you even have people like Nigel Farage, as usual, sort of jumping on the bandwagon, trying to get out in front, saying this is the only way to go. You know, a stark break, I think, with what many people would have considered his actual sort of economic outlook broadly. But I think it also taps into the national mood, which is that the days of that sort of Thatcherite attitude, which is the market can solve everything, well, people are looking around at all the privatised industries of this country and going, it's not particularly worked out very well. And when it is a question of national security and how much a plant might lose on a day-to-day basis is actually not by the by, I think a lot of people will take that view. But yes, even if it wasn't politically popular, which is why I'm slightly amazed that Labour isn't going sort of gung-ho on this, I think it is realistically the only way of keeping this going. You're not going to find a buyer at this stage who's going to be able to prop it up. And if you are, it's not necessarily going to be a friendly one if what we're talking about is companies that are backed by nation states.
OK. If we look here at the Daily Mirror, I think it's inside pages. Susie, tell us a little bit about how they're covering it here.
Well, they're talking about, this rare recall vote. It's not very often that you bring the MPs back in, especially during a recess. It usually shows something drastic happening overnight, like a war suddenly breaking out. When it is something you have known in advance, it is a sign of not having got your ducks in a row at the right time, or having been very badly let down, perhaps in talks with the company in question. But, I mean, they're talking here about British Steel hanging in the balance and so on. There is still a steel industry in various places. Sheffield Forgemasters uses electric furnaces which are creating the steels for our nuclear submarines and so on at the moment. You have to have these facilities, but we've got to remember as well, every solar panel has steel. Every electric car has steel in it. Every hybrid car has steel in it. Every wind turbine has steel in it. You have to be able to produce that stuff. And there will be a carbon cost to it. There always is. But you can't go completely green with it, but you still need to have the steel. And that's the most vital thing. And I think that repeated governments from, I think I can recall at least the coalition era, just thought this wasn't an issue and they could push it down the road and someone else would deal with it. And I did think that when we had a Labour government in who had been so strong about this and backed the Mirror's Save Our Steel campaign in opposition, that they would be a little bit more on the front foot. They don't seem to be, unfortunately, which is why we are where we are.
Just to link us to the next story, I'm wondering whether, the 10 days that we've had since Liberation Day and all the stresses and uncertainties over tariffs, whether they're on, whether they're off, do you think that played any part in sharpening minds, Benedict?
I suspect it probably has. You can't... Look, if we in the UK can't necessarily trust what the US is going to do as an economic policy on a day-to-day basis, then yes. And actually, as much as we may have made some progress on things like electronic arc technology, ultimately, if the supply chains, Susie was talking about all of these things things, be it wind turbines, be it solar panels, all of these things ultimately do come back to China. And if you have a situation where the US is actively invoking a trade war and possibly worse against China, you're going to find yourself in a very difficult position where your supply chains will almost certainly get affected. Even if the Trump administration goes, do you know what, no tariffs for Europe or the Brits anymore, that's still going to be impacted by this. So yes, you can't rely on Washington to tell you what it's going to do in advance. You therefore can't rely on what Beijing and the companies associated with Beijing and controlled by them will do. Yes, it needs to focus minds, and it won't just be the UK, of course, but it'll be Europe as well. But in particular, as we've said several times, this is something that a properly developed economy that is serious about being a power on the world stage needs to be able to produce its own basic materials, and this is one of them.
But one of the big problems from tariffs is going to be that China now has lots of steel, which is quite cheap, can't sell it into America, will be dumping it on the rest of the world market, and that's going to really affect British steel and the prices we have to pay for.
Speaking of tariffs and, of course, the US, where it all originates from, if you look at the front page of the FT weekend, Fed ready to help markets as Trump tariffs trigger a sell-off. I mean, to both of you, we've seen, of course, a lot of instability in the markets, Trump sort of changing his mind. What do you make of this headline, Susie?
Well, the real risk long-term now for Trump is, he's reversed some tariffs, but he's still got this huge problem with China. And he's still kept those, and they've got retaliatory tariffs back at them. Now, those two countries are responsible for about half of the world's growth last year. So they start taking lumps out of each other, and that is still going on, then that's going to affect everybody. And what this is a sell-off of American bonds. So traditionally, the US government has been seen as such a safe haven that, its bonds were a safe thing to buy and to invest in. If they start now bailing out of that worldwide, then it shows that they think that the American government is unstable, that its economy is not a safe place, and that the government is not necessarily always going to step in to honour its debts. And that's going to be the long-term thing that will affect its own debt repayments and its own consumer industry as well.
Briefly, please.
Briefly, maybe things will calm down by his third term.
OK, you can have a little bit longer than that.
Is that civil war?
I know, that's the joke. Yeah, OK, no.
OK, all right. We'll talk about it later, I'm sure. Stay with us. Coming up, Michael Gove has a peerage and Jeremy Hunt has a knighthood. Susie's paper has some thoughts, pretty strong ones, so do our guests when we come back.
Paris reverberated to the sights, sounds and smells of conflict. There's a focal point to all this anger, and that is Emmanuel Macron. I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Brussels. There are dozens of people desperately clambering to get onto that boat. It is a chaotic scene, but it's being watched by dozens of French police officers on the beach. I've reported on migration across Europe, close up on the ground, understanding that sense of desperation and meeting the criminal gangs behind it. This old fishing boat set off from the Libyan port of Tobruk. There were 606 people who were on board. So we've been distributing life jackets to all the people on board this boat, and now the first person is coming on board. This is the ugly side of Italian football.
In Italy, everything is really organized.
Football's problems with hooliganism, racism were just dormant, and now they're back and they're getting worse. We cover so many countries, languages and cultures and work hard to gain trust to bring you the full story first. Help is slowly reaching these places. It's not just homes, but whole streets like this one that have been reduced to rubble and dust. This is a picture of destruction. Everywhere you look in this mountaintop community, there is absolute devastation. These are the settlers in waiting, keen to start a new life, to annex Gaza for Israel.
The least we can do is just kick them out of our land.
Gaza, which is just 2 miles in that direction, is under attack again. Getting the chance to tell people's stories, it's a privilege.
Run-In is live on NBC and Peacock with the final sprint for European qualification.
That is massive!
Saturday, it's North versus West in a London showdown. Arsenal secured bragging rights in the first meeting. Superstar for Arsenal. But Brentford are looking to make European history. This is the Premier League Run-In, live on NBC and streaming on Peacock.
The most significant day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
They want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first.
A show of military might and menace. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Sky News. Get the full story first.
Have a quick word for Sky News. Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine? American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display.
I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me in the studio, Benedict Spence and Susie Boniface. Let's go straight to the Times and a headline there about Ukraine. A Trump aide, Keith Kellogg, who's meant to be the special envoy really to Ukraine, although hasn't been particularly active. He's slightly been outclassed by Steve Witkoff, but he is saying that we can split up Ukraine like Berlin post-World War II, where you'd have the US zone, Russian, French, British. What do you make of it, Benedict?
Fortunately, nobody's mentioned building a big, beautiful wall yet, or getting the Mexicans to pay for it. So it's nice to see that there are some slight changes on Trump's approach to this. What you appear to have here is a general who has got a map and some crayons and is drawing on it, and he's come up with something which is remarkably similar to what I imagine the Russians had in mind when they actually launched their invasion. The way that this has been phrased, the way that you can just magically do things. I mean, I like the can-do spirit. I'm not sure that that's going to go down particularly well in Ukraine. I'm also not sure it's going to go down particularly well in Moscow, if I'm going to be completely honest. I don't see how there is a world in which the Kremlin accepts there being NATO peacekeepers effectively in any part of Ukraine. So it's a lovely idea, and that it'll get us all singing around the table Kumbaya, just like has happened in Berlin for so long. But I don't think it's in any way realistic.
Also, you know, we had Steve Witkoff shaking hands with Vladimir Putin today in St. Petersburg, so you sort of think this might have made the Times front page, but one wonders how much influence he actually has.
Yeah, it's astonishing. It's just, I think it's a sign of how much the current Trump administration, if you didn't already know it from the tariffs kerfuffle we've had over the past week or two, is populated by what was at the bottom of the barrel and has since been emptied out. And to suggest that what happened in Berlin was successful for anybody involved, that people didn't die, and also to totally ignore the fact that that happened after post the end of 1945, because there was no functioning government in Germany and it had to be administered by the Allies, and that's why they carved up Berlin in different ways. And it was for a very definite period of time in which they then walked away and let them sort themselves out with a wall. Ukraine has a functioning government. They do not need someone to come along and run a bit of it for them. And it says in here, it suggests that Ukraine's big enough to take several armies in it. I mean, it just makes me think of a general who's got a map and a little stick with little people who's pushing things around. And
with crayons, we've had sticks.
Yeah. The 19th century all over again. Let's just carve things up and everything will be right.
Do you know what the key thing here is? The complete absence of US peacekeepers. So actually the major force in NATO, the major world power when it would come to this sort of thing, is conspicuously absent. So actually how viable this would be without US military support, which Donald Trump is very keen he doesn't want to give, it can't exist.
OK, we've got 90 seconds left. Let's look at Rishi Sunak's honours list, front page of the Daily Mirror. Susie, don't hold back.
Right, Jeremy Hunt, Sir, apparently, forgot he had luxury flats, presided over what was a winter crisis and became a regular daily crisis in the NHS, left behind a debatable-sized black hole in the national finances we're all still paying for. James Cleverly, now a Sir. No one can think of anything that he's done apart from possibly making an ill-advised rape joke at one party and starting the deal of the Chagos Islands. And then we've got Lord Michael Gove, levelling up himself into the House of Lords while knocking 4% off GDP with Brexit. Thanks. Yeah, all of you, take a bow.
But Benedict, all former prime ministers do this, don't they?
Yeah, they do. This is. I know. Well, at some point, maybe Labour are in power. They possibly could do something about changing this. Look, I like the pageantry. I think they all look very pretty in ermine. But I largely agree that the last government was not particularly spectacular. But hey, you got to give these peerages out to somebody. You can't just leave them on the table. Otherwise, you end up giving them to people who give large, sizable, questionable political donations, and we don't possibly want that.
OK. We're going to leave it there. Susie Boniface, Benedict Spence, stay with us. We'll talk about this more in the next hour. Now let's take a look at the weather.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Well, the weather has been lovely, but it's going to change over the weekend, becoming cooler and more unsettled with some significant rain in the forecast for next week. It'll be a chilly start to the day as clear skies overnight have allowed temperatures to fall low enough for a frost in some rural areas. Early mist and fog over eastern counties will clear to sunny skies. It'll be breezy in the northwest and southwest where rain approaches. Now, through the morning, cloud will take over much of Ireland, Wales and the southwest with some patchy outbreaks of rain. Central and eastern parts of the UK mainland will be largely dry, sunny and warm with inland temperatures topping 21 degrees Celsius. Coastal areas will be cooler in freshening sea breezes. By evening, cloud will have increased across all parts of the country, bar East Anglia and the southeast.
A bright start and always a warm welcome. Qatar Airways sponsors the weather.
Well, coming up next on Sky News at 11, all the latest as Parliament is recalled to discuss the future of British Steel.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party.